Guys, I'm here with the artist Adam Fierman, and his ongoing project is called 𝓹ill, and it's drawing parallels between cultural trends and ecstasy pill design. So you could almost call him a cultural ecstasy archivist. That's what I want to call him anyway. How did this project come about?
Well, I was working in marketing and advertising and working with some of the brands whose logos have been used in these pills and realizing that they spend millions and millions of euros to develop their brands, which then get stolen for free by pill producers to push an increasingly commoditized product. And I was fascinated by that world. Like, why would you steal this logo versus that? And you start to realize that it's about what's piquing in cultural interest. And a brand would pop up, whether it's a Netflix show or a car brand or a fashion label. And as it trends in culture, it's also trending in pill design. And you start to realize that the producers, in their interest and attempt to sell more pills, are trying to tap into whatever is the sort of zeitgeisty moment in culture.
And of course, all this is documented in your book, 𝓹ill.
Say the first 40 pills, front and back, we captured them with a phase 1 camera, which is 150 megapixels, I believe. You can print them full size up to 2 meters by 2 meters.
Wow.
We did that for a show. And the book contains the first 40 pills. Since then, we've shot an additional 40, and that collection's continuing to grow. And so we're looking for a publisher to bring out the second version of the book, which will have more of the stories, more of the images, and capture more of this sort of cultural moment that is reflected in the pill design.
Okay, well, let's get back to basics, Adam. Tell me, why do ecstasy pills have designs?
Why do they? Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are 3 reasons, really. The first reason is to differentiate a commoditized product, like I said. Especially in the Netherlands, when you do pill testing, it turns out most pills are pretty clean and contain a similar range of MDMA. And so trying to differentiate your product is one. The second one, which we found when talking to a producer through an encrypted chat platform, was that people associate the quality of the pressing itself with the quality of the product inside. And so the producers were chasing finer and finer pill designs as a demonstration of their commitment to quality, whether or not that's backed up by the data. That was one. And then the final reason, this was fascinating, the street dealers were saying that if a pill design was interesting, they sold more of it, irrespective of how much someone wanted to take. We even saw this there was a set of 3 wise monkey pills. Don't hear,
see no evil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the street dealers said that even if someone wanted 1 pill, they were buying all 3. And so it really is a marketing world that we're talking about.
That's really interesting. And do you think that quality of press does does have any sort of correlation to quality of the pill?
I have no idea.
No idea.
I have no idea. What I will say is that the Netherlands is most likely the largest producer of pills on the planet.
Yes.
And it is not for the local market. A lot of it is distributed around the world. And fragile pills end up as dust by the time they get to the United States or Australia.
Yep.
And so the quality of the press should lead to pills that transport better. So I imagine that's also a piece of it. And to be able to hold their branding when they get to a new market. You'll notice that a lot of the pills, or a good number of pills produced in the Netherlands, have indications of their origin on them. They have little stamps that say NL. And they want to make sure those details don't rub off by the time they get to a place where they want credit for having produced them.
That's interesting, because I did interview an ecstasy wholesaler once, and he said that sometimes when he gets 1,000 pills, he has to get a refund for 100 because they're crushed up in the bottom of the bag.
Right.
Yeah.
Another one is access to technology. That Alibaba has changed this whole process. Now I believe the government here has restricted access to buying pill dyes and presses that way. But at a time, you could send a design to China and within a week or so have a custom dye and mold set made to fit in an industrial-sized pill press machine. And there was no questionable legality about owning a pill press machine. No. So it allowed people to do custom designs much more quickly. And so whereas in the 90s, you saw the same pills over and over.
Doves, Mitsubishi.
Exactly, exactly. Now it cycles so much faster. So for a festival, for a micro brand that's popping up, for a holiday, for something that's popping up on social media, you'll see pills. And one producer we talked to said, if a customer orders just 10,000 pills, they would do a custom mold design for them, which is a complete change from what used to be possible.
It's interesting you say about in the Netherlands they're sort of restricting this equipment now. Is it a criminal offence to own a pill press?
I don't know, and I'm the wrong person to ask. What I do know is that when we started this project, we were curious about the origin for the machinery. How do you get it? How are people doing this? And at that time, there were lots of legitimate suppliers of pill and molds, pill dyes and molding materials, and they could openly sell their wares online. Some of them out of the UK. These are legitimate businesses. Selling their products for who knows what, they would say as they wave their hands.
Not their responsibility.
Exactly.
Kind of,
I don't know who is pressing vitamin B12 into a Hello Kitty shape. But they could sell those things legitimately. Now it seems if you search Alibaba for pill press and dye, you get no results. And I don't imagine that's Chinese sellers restricting it.
Yeah.
I imagine it's local IPs and local telecoms holding it back.
Interesting. Of course, one of the main sort of interesting and unique aspects of this project to me is that it sort of tracks these cultural trends in the pill design.
Yeah.
But another aspect of it is the sort of quality of the photographs. As these are the best quality photographs of ecstasy pills ever made. Can you describe the process that you actually do?
Yeah, all credit for that goes to the photographer I work with, Peter Andrew. He goes by Peter Andrew Lusztyk, a Canadian, Toronto-based photographer and wonderful human. And he focuses on ultra macro photography of everyday objects. Think a Lego figure, a mushroom he finds in the forest, postage stamps, currency. And I connected with him over this project. It turns out we had a mutual friend. Reached out to him about it, told him about it. He was on board. And so he already had the expertise to do this. And it was almost just about directing his ability to a space that had never been captured this way. And one of the reasons this hasn't happened before is that the equipment we used to pull this off the first time, to buy it outright would be like 70 grand.
Wow. Okay.
Of course, we rented it.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, just in rental fees, we probably paid 5 grand just for the equipment and the space to capture these pills.
Wow.
There's really something amazing about taking the small, everyday, the thing you've seen 1,000 times but never really noticed, and now putting it blown up, in your face in a way that you can't ignore it. Yeah. And I think that's what this project has done for a lot of people as they've seen it around Amsterdam.
Yeah. You mentioned before that you've actually worked or you've met people who actually work for the actual brands that have appeared on the pills, and obviously all these pills are an egregious copyright infringement.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But
you can't send a cease and desist if you don't know who is needing to cease or desist.
But how do these brands feel when their designs are used?
I think there's a public reaction and there's probably a private reaction. I can't speak to their experience. I can tell you that we've had a few times where brands will reach out, sometimes with legally worded letters asking to not use their imagery in representation for pop-ups and things we do. Because while there is an association with, for instance, a Mitsubishi pill, I doubt Mitsubishi would want that association to be public. We also saw, however, that there's some brands who I think unofficially would say it's kind of a badge of honor. Because it means that your brand has won in culture, succeeded in culture. And one story, I will not name the brand for this. When we did our first pop-up gallery space, a man in a business suit came in. He was looking around the space and came up to me. Can I ask you a question? Yeah. And he gave me a business card. And he was a representative from one of the alcohol brands. And he said, is there a way we could have our logo in this world? And I asked him, what are you actually asking for right now? And he said, no, we don't want to sell pills. We don't want to be associated with this. We just want our logo to also be among the stuff I'm seeing on the wall. I told him I couldn't help him, but what an incredible moment.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
And surprising that he thought you could help him as well.
It's kind of scary that he thought I could help him, I think. But just the boldness with which he could ask as a representative of a company. Yeah. And I think that speaks to the culture around MDMA and ecstasy pills in the Netherlands. Yes. Which, of course, is highly illegal, but I think culturally there's much more acceptance of it, especially in separation from other drugs and other chemicals.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think of the reputation of that particular substance, it's got strong connotations of things like empathy, love, respect, peace. Then when you take a drug like, for instance, meth or crack cocaine, it's got connotations of sort of violence and things like that. So that does make total sense. Sometimes the ecstasy pills designs can be a bit unuseful from a harm reduction perspective, right? You mentioned that the Blue Punisher. Now, the Blue Punisher has a globally renowned reputation. I think you mentioned it on your website that the strongest pill ever found was a Blue Punisher, and it was 477 milligrams. Confiscated by a bouncer in Manchester, I believe. So Manchester keeps their reputation as the sort of one of the party hubs of the UK, But you ended up with loads of different Blue Punishers with a range of strengths, didn't you?
That's right. I think the Blue Punisher shape has been popular for more than a decade, probably close to 20 years. in this book, in the first issue of the book, there were two different blue punishers. One of them tested around 120 milligrams, and the other in the 400s. Like you said, it was probably from a similar batch to the one found in Manchester. And then since then, we photographed two more blue punisher pills. So if the purpose of this pill design is to recognize and to recommend a pill, it fails in that regard. And there are also legal reasons for producers to increase the amount of MDMA in a pill in the Netherlands. One is probably showing off to producers to see how much you can jam in there. The other one is that there's an unofficial rule that the police won't really bother you if you're carrying 2 or fewer pills in the Netherlands. And so, unsurprisingly, the producers are trying to maximize the amount of MDMA in the pill and saying, well, just take a fourth of it. So now people are carrying around the equivalent of 8 pills instead of 2 to sort of skirt unofficial regulations.
Yeah, loophole almost.
That's right.
So it's like... So it's not, they don't go off the milligram contents. Okay,
right.
So that does make sense then
Right.
from the producer's perspective.
Right, you even see that in the design, the physical design of the pills. Years past, you never would see a break line on a pill.
Yeah.
Now almost every pill has a break line to make it easy to break in half. And even one pill, the Cerberus, the 3-headed hellhound, that had 2 different break lines. Like a marketing ploy to suggest this is 3 doses, break it into 3.
Yeah.
And so the design of the pill also plays into how they're being marketed and pushed in the space.
I wonder if it's caused more sort of medical emergencies or not. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
We've sort of seen a slight increase since these strong pills came in the UK. About 50 people a year die in the UK from overdose, but it is relatively low risk profile compared to many other drugs. I'm going to show this on the screen now. This is a recent conference. These are all blue punishers that they tested.
Wow.
And you can see they go from 80, but mostly around 150 milligrams, that's the average. But you even get an outlier there, which is 250. So the message really to the audience is that the stamp doesn't really have any correlation to the strength.
Oh, absolutely not. And I don't encourage or discourage people doing what they want to do with their body and the things they consume. But what I will say is, if you're going to put anything into your body, it behooves you to test it.
Yes. And
especially with the availability of over-the-counter pill testing, or in the Netherlands with inexpensive or free pill testing, it shocks me that people are relying on the integrity of a pill producer using the same logo to tell you something about what you're putting in your body.
Yeah, and sometimes I get a bit sort of saddened by people who say, well, I know my dealer. I trust my dealer.
Yeah.
Do you know your dealer's dealer or the dealer's dealer's dealer?
Well, I like to cook. And every now and then, without meaning to, I'll put twice as much salt in a dish than I wanted to. And I won't know that until I take a bite.
Yeah.
And I don't think my house guests should not trust me. But I think that these things happen, and some of it is unintentional. And I wouldn't want to be the victim of an unintended accident that way.
Yeah.
And so whether it's intentional or not, I think as an individual, we have to take personal responsibility for the choices that we're making, and especially with the availability of testing. And I believe that testing kits and testing availability should be universal. Unfortunately, now they're not. And so there are lots of markets where people are having to rely on the word of their buddy who took it yesterday, who may be twice their weight or twice their experience. And I think that can lead to all kinds of issues.
Absolutely. And in the UK, when people do sadly pass away, it tends to be young female, often in their sort of, maybe in their very early 20s. And I wonder sometimes if they get their boyfriends to get the pills, and then they go, right, we've got the pills, we'll have half each. But the boyfriend might weigh 3 or 4 more stone.
Right.
And also, if someone's on their period as well, it hits them harder. So you need to take that into account as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things it's a recommendation culturally here is that no one should ever take a full pill. No. In general, that's what people
crazy.
Talk about.
Yeah.
And I think that's really caught on in most circles. When it was just King's Day a few days ago. And you see people engaging in what I would consider less harmful behaviors by taking a half or even a quarter of a pill and seeing how it goes. And also, again, even on days like that here in the Netherlands, there's social support around, there's medical support around, and there's a police system where if you were in trouble, you would feel comfortable talking to them.
Yes.
Rather than where I come in the States, you would avoid them at all costs, even in a critical, life-threatening situation.
Yeah. And it's the same in the UK as well, that if you ring the ambulance for a drug emergency, they don't come with the police unless there's a minor involved, or it's actually a fatality. They're the only 2 things that the British police will actually come as well with the ambulance. So, always ring an ambulance if needed, guys. Never worry, you're not going to get in trouble for that.
And one of the things with this project is I tried almost to stay away from both the usage and the legal side of it. Because one, I'm not an expert. I'm not the person to talk to about legality, really about harm reduction. For me, the most interesting part of this is as a window into culture. And a window into culture that I think too few of us have ever peered through. Most of the time, people are looking at this pill for a second in the back of a club or in a festival where they're taking
the security are coming.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, I feel like what we're doing is we're just, for the first time ever, just taking a true closer look at the pills and really investigating them and looking at them almost through the lens of an artist rather than a user. And I think what's happened is it's opened up this art to audiences who have no interest in using the drugs, but are really curious about the cultural impact.
Sociological element of
it. There's
a
bit of a, maybe there's an anthropological or sociological spin on this. And I find it just fascinating that Squid Game comes out on Netflix season 1, and less than a month later, there's Squid Game pills here in the Netherlands. Yeah. It's amazing.
And it was the same with Takeshi69. That was my favourite design in the book, actually. Do you want to tell us about that one?
Tekashi69, who's gone by a number of different names, was a rapper of fame in the United States, and he eventually went to prison, I believe, for potentially ratting out something, or like a...
I think he avoided prison by grassing up.
That's right. He ratted out...
I'm not a hip-hop expert.
Right, clearly neither am I.
But he's known as a snitch now, which apparently is pretty much the worst thing you can be in the hip-hop scene.
Right. And so Tekashi69 had a moment of incredible popularity.
Yes.
And in that window, some very well-made Tekashi69 pills were produced. The biggest batch were in 4 colors. I think it was sort of red, teal, gray.
Because that's the colour of his hair, right?
Exactly. All the colours of his hair. And they were incredibly well made. The detail is truly remarkable, the amount of detail. In addition to a large 69 on the back of the pill, on the front of the pill, there's a tiny 69 on his forehead, which is visible. And one of the reports we saw online, and we checked this as we were filming it, is that there was an aroma, a scent, that was added to each of the colors to distinguish them. One was blueberry, one was peach.
Wow.
Which we can question the morality of making something that looks like candy smell like candy as well.
Yeah.
But just from, a marketing differentiation perspective, I found that fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are the ones that stand out to you in the first book?
I think in the first book, there's an owl. It's a beautiful owl.
Is that TripAdvisor logo?
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not.
It's
okay.
not.
Right.
It's in a way, it's even more fascinating than that because TripAdvisor is a huge brand. This owl is the owl from the Panama Club, which is a long-standing club in Amsterdam.
Oh, okay.
And it's their logo.
Yeah.
So the logo of a local club in Amsterdam has now risen to now be all over the world, and people have no association with where it even comes from. Or there's another one. It looks like a gorilla with headphones.
Yeah.
And that's the logo of 𝓹ill, which is a classic sort of legendary bar in Rotterdam.
Oh, wow.
This is a bar.
Yeah.
It's a corner pub.
Not even a club.
It's their logo, and now it's all around the world on pill designs. I think others that really stood out to me are some of the juxtaposition of luxury goods and pills, Louis Vuitton pills. And often when there's a lot of care that goes into production, multi-layered pills with different colors, that kind of thing.
So in England, there's an urban legend where they say that if it's multi-layered, it's much better quality because they can only make them in the Netherlands.
I don't think that's true anymore.
You have to have a certain type of press or something. I don't know.
Yeah, what I know, again, this is...
it's an urban legend.
Well, maybe urban legends come from truth at one time.
Yeah.
I think it's no longer true. I know there have been some double-stacked, double-colored pills produced in the United States, as far as I'm aware. I believe, and I heard this from producers, I don't know this from personal experience, they said the reason why it takes more care is that it's just a longer process. It's more of a time commitment. They would use a blank stamp. It's really a 3-part piece. There's a mold with a hole cut out of it and then 2 dies that push in. And so they would push the first half of the pill and then change their powder, change everything, and then repress them. And so at the time when that started, there wasn't an automated process for it, I'm told. Now there are automated processes for it, but it still dramatically slows down the production.
Wow. So someone had to sit there and physically stamp it.
I mean, there were originally that motion you're doing, the slot machine motion, that was how these were pressed. They were pressed individually. Yeah. And now, I'm sure in barns around the Netherlands, there are incredible multi-ton press machines that are cranking out thousands and thousands of pills a minute.
Wow. And when you interviewed the producer, is it synthesized on the same site it's pressed?
I don't know. I'm not aware of that. I know that a lot of the chemicals that are brought in to produce MDMA come from other places. Come from Poland, come across the border. I don't know how much synthesis was happening in the Netherlands for those pills. What I do know is that the actual pressing of the pills was happening in their facility. And this is a person who I was chatting through an encrypted chat platform, got connected with them, never met them in person, but I was struck by, even years ago, one, how eloquent they were in talking about the design of it, and how proud they were of the designs, knowing that they could never really get credit for it.
Wow.
And so I think in a way, there's sort of an informal community of pill producers, and they're doing this for street cred with one another, in a way. And it was strange to think that someone is sitting in their room on Adobe Illustrator designing their next batch of pill and thinking about what's going to really push these products in the market.
They are artists. What did they think of your project? Were they happy?
They were suspicious, which they should be.
Yeah.
They were suspicious,
Yeah.
and I don't think that some of the people we talked to only would speak to us once they'd seen the first image, because there was such an investment in our time and equipment to produce that first image that they thought, okay, this is
The police
real.
wouldn't do that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or maybe the police would. Maybe the police should.
Oh, we're not. Hopefully, we won't give them ideas.
Yeah, I think they have all the ideas they need.
Yeah.
And so they were suspicious at the beginning, and then they were really interested and excited. When I produced the book, I reached out to a few of them, asking them, if there was a safe address, can I send you a book?
Yeah.
Not a single one of them agreed to that for good reason.
Yeah.
But I like to think that when we did the pop-up show here in Amsterdam and we sold 90 of these books, almost the entire edition, I'm hoping that someone who walked in the door that day and shook my hand was one of the people I've been secretly talking to.
It's almost better to not know, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, that's really interesting.
When after the show had happened, I was continuing just to sell the prints and things from the show out of my house where we're sitting right now, and a person came to buy one particular design. He was really interested in one, and I asked him. He'd bought it in stickers and different size prints and everything he wanted in the book, and he looked around sort of, and he told me that, well, I sold 30,000 of those pills.
That was his pension.
Almost. And so I asked him about it, and he wanted to give it to all the people who back in the day were involved in this thing with him as a memento of this life of crime that they used to live, that they'd
and
grown
they probably
out of.
got away with it, didn't they? Yeah. So it's sort of like the old days,
Yeah,
trip down memory lane sort of thing.
I think so.
What sort of reaction did you have from the general public after this pop-up?
Well, there've been people who have an association with specific pills. They'll see it and it'll remind them of a festival.
Best night they've ever been on.
Yeah, or worst maybe. But there's a specific memory it's triggering for them. Or the whole concept of this world is triggering memories for them, often fond memories. So that was one group. Another group were people who have no interest in using MDMA or using ecstasy pill, but were fascinated that the Netherlands, this tiny country really, is the world's largest producer potentially of ecstasy pills. And they were curious.
It is generally accepted that it is, right?
Yes, yeah.
It's 80% or so, they think, right?
It's pretty high. I don't have the exact numbers because when we wrote the book, it was almost 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And the Netherlands likes to debate those numbers, of course.
Yep.
But it's pretty well agreed that the Netherlands is the number one producer, and for distribution especially. And so there were some people who were just fascinated that this is a fact about their country, and yet it's a world they know nothing about. And then finally, there were people who, seeing our posters around town, stumbled into our gallery show, who said, this is my opportunity to learn about this, not in a dark, shady room, but to learn about it in the context of more of an art gallery, and to talk to people who were from the harm reduction side who were there, or talk to people who were from the history side who were just there at the show. And so it became this intersection of communities and cultures, which I think was really healthy. It felt like for the first time, instead of this being in the shadows in the back of a room that no one's talking about, now we're putting it into the light, into a spotlight, up into clean gallery walls, and we're talking about this in a way that I believe sparked a lot of interest in conversation and continues. Almost every day people are reaching out to keep talking about this.
Yeah. Do you think it would have worked with another drug if someone did this with, I don't know, meth?
I don't know. Well, there are two pieces of that, I suppose. Other than some research chemicals, 2CB or those kind of things, there really are no other drugs that are branded this way. The bags, the folded paper that cocaine comes in, some of those have been branded. Made
apart from the kilo bricks.
That as well.
Yeah.
Or ecstasy blotter, LSD blotter sheet. Yeah.
I guess the only other thing now is this kind of recent trend of the Cali weed where it comes in a branded pack.
Right.
Yeah.
But there hasn't been another drug I'm aware of that uses the same kind of stolen branding.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you could do it with another chemical. And even if you could, I think the association people have, the positive associations, for good or for bad with MDMA, allow this to happen in a way that doesn't make people uncomfortable.
Yes.
I think that if this was for cocaine, or if this was for methamphetamine, or if this was for heroin, then the incredible damage that they're causing to communities through consumption of this, I think would turn people off to the project. Almost universally agreed, like the damage that the production of ecstasy and the use of ecstasy is causing is mostly because of the criminality of it and what that leads to.
Byproducts and things.
Absolutely. Yeah, the environmental consequences of this, and the fact that the people who are doing it are criminals by legal status and have to do things that are criminal.
Yeah.
And so it leads to behaviors that aren't transparent and aren't in compliance with an agreed upon system for how to produce things safely and distribute them safely. And there's a lot of talk in the Netherlands every year, including a wonderful NGO, Mainline, did a pop-up of what an ecstasy shop could look like.
Yes, I wrote an article about that.
Just fascinating.
Yeah.
And there really has been more interest in that discussion. Even last year, there was a group of former police officers from around the world, retired, who came to the Netherlands to talk about this feeling of recognizing that all the work they had done was for nothing.
Yes.
Because they'd been arresting people, pulling them off the street, stopping production, but it hadn't changed the numbers at all. And there's an opportunity to actually change lives, and it's not through putting more people in prison and trying to stop this.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess with the stamps, if you stamped another drug in the style of ecstasy, it would probably cause misidentification of the drug, because if you stamped a 2CB, exactly like an ecstasy pill, well, people would think they were taking ecstasy, wouldn't they?
That's a problem in the Netherlands. In the book, there is a double trouble pill, and the red one was found through testing to contain a high dose of MDMA. There was a yellow one that was 2CB.
Right.
And they're the same pill. You would describe them the same way. The only thing different was the 2CB pill was a bit thinner, and the color was different. And that would be a very different experience for someone.
Yeah,
and,
very different.
And not knowing what they're taking. So there, not only is there possibility for confusion, there is confusion. Typically, the 2CB pills, some of which we've photographed, are smaller.
It's much smaller usually.
And that's the indication. However, that's not enough in the moment where someone may already be inebriated and is redosing on something.
Yeah.
It does cause confusion, has certainly caused confusion.
And there's always stories with other drugs where people think they're taking coke, for instance, and they end up taking ketamine, and it's a disaster. They have to order an Uber straight away. Or
fentanyl in the United States.
Yes.
And fortunately,
well, luckily we don't have that in Europe in the same way like that. But
I mean, in this moment, I think that it's very fortunate that we're not hearing those stories all over the place. We're not hearing it with accidental overdose of fentanyl with ketamine or with cocaine.
No.
And I worry that there's going to be a moment where we no longer get to say that.
Well, people are so terrified of this that I get asked it all the time, and it's fentanyl, because of the terrible situation in America, it's become the bogeyman in Europe now. People are very worried about that happening, but it's yet to happen. We are seeing synthetic opioids in the heroin supply and also the benzo supply.
Okay.
But we're yet to see it in the coke, the ketamine, or anything like that, which is something that I get asked at least once every other day.
And it gets back to the same point, again, not advocating or dissuading people from using these chemicals, but if there is opportunity to test the things you're putting in your body, you should do it.
Absolutely.
One of the dangerous things with fentanyl is that in a pile of powder cocaine, the fentanyl could be on the left side, and if you only test the right side, you won't see it.
Right.
And so there are very few ways to really test powder chemicals without dissolving all of them in a liquid, testing that suspension, and then drying it out, which I don't think any user is ever going to do. No. And that's terrifying. Yeah. Because at some point, we won't be able to say that fentanyl's not a problem in Europe.
Yeah. Did we talk about the racist pills that we've seen, as we've sadly seen a sort of lurch towards the far right across Europe? We've also seen a rise in Nazi pills.
Right.
Is that something that's come onto your radar?
It has. Someone reached out, looking for when we're going to do our next photo shoot, and suggesting that they had a pill we should capture. And it was indeed. It was a spread eagle Nazi emblem swastika in the middle pill. And if we ever take that photo, which I would like to document it, I don't think we would ever sell prints of it.
No.
But I would like to document it for the cultural purpose of it. And I find it fascinating. I think whether it's trolling, producers just trolling, or whether it comes from some darker instinct, it's certainly troubling, and it's certainly interesting. And I do believe that there are pills that are sort of shock value pills. I actually think putting Hello Kitty on a pill is a similar shock value, trying to associate something that feels very disconnected from the drug. I don't know what it means. What do you think it means?
Well, firstly, I find it quite jarring because, to me, ecstasy has these strong connotations of love, empathy, peace, and you contrast that with something that has strong connotations of genocide.
Yeah.
So firstly, it's jarring. But yeah, like you, I don't know what the motives are for people doing that. But then I noticed that shortly after that, then you got the Antifa pills, didn't you?
Yeah.
So that was, I don't know if it's the same sort of producer making them both, or someone made it in response to the other one. Like I said, because of the secretive nature of this, because it's illegal, this industry, you just never get the answers to these questions.
It's true. I mean, when you bring up the disconnect potentially from the experience a lot of people have and the designs, I'm also reminded that the Punisher is one of the most common designs that used. The giant skulls in general. Yeah. So there is sort of a hardcore music scene emblems that come through. Not to suggest that far-right symbols fit in that category, but there are pills that have been very popular that seem to be not a natural fit with the empathogen experience that people are having when they take it.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with the, like you said, with the big white skulls were very popular in England a few years ago.
Right. There was a skull with the logo, or the name of my brand, a clothing brand on the back of it. There was just a giant gray skull or in different colors, and they were really popular for years. And it is an interesting psychological notion that you're taking a skull and crossbones for something that you're hoping is going to give you a great 4 hours.
Yeah, same with the Donald Trump pills, right?
Right, yeah.
When you interviewed the producer, they produced some of them Donald Trump pills, right?
Yeah.
What did they say about that?
They were sort of bewildered, and I think the direct quote was, they weren't sure why anyone would want to put Donald Trump in their mouth. But they said that there were interesting cultural trends, truly trends up and down of popularity of these pills. And sure enough, after the first election and the rising popularity of Donald Trump, there were more of these pills. And while Joe Biden was president again, we saw fewer Donald Trump pills. And now, back in the market, we've seen new Donald Trump pills.
Wow.
And so it really is following in lockstep with the zeitgeist and with culture. And at this point, I assume, without complete knowledge of the market and what's being produced, anytime I see something that's a new piece of culture, I imagine that there are pills being produced to reflect it.
Right.
Even if I've never seen them.
Yeah.
It's worth assuming.
Have you ever accurately predicted the next pill design?
Not yet. I think they're all much more clever than I am. Honestly, I think they have their thumb on the pulse of culture.
Yeah.
And not just culture here in the Netherlands. They're Netherlands pills that are based on memes from other countries. Because, in the Netherlands, you often see pills that are the local supermarket chains. Those aren't popular in the rest of the world because no one has a Jumbo or an Berghain. Yeah. But there are also brands that are Australian brands that are produced in the Netherlands, or American cultural references produced in the Netherlands. I saw, for instance, a New York Yankees logo pill. That was one of the ones we were shooting. And, that's not a famous brand in Europe. People may be aware of it, but that pill is for global distribution.
Yeah. And there was the COVID ones. Do you remember them?
Yeah, the COVID smiley face mask.
Yeah, with the mask on.
There was also a Pfizer vaccine, which is in the first book.
Yeah.
Which was interesting for a few reasons. One, vaccine was spelled in Dutch on the back of it.
Okay,
and on the front of it was the Pfizer logo. And so a COVID mask and a Pfizer vaccine come out, of course, during COVID.
Yeah.
And you think, again, what is this telling us?
Yeah.
What are we trying to point to with the design of these?
Yeah, and it was really interesting as well because there was you got some of them people that were like, I won't take the vaccine, but they were but they're like they're happy for the Coke, the ecstasy.
Right.
That's all fine.
Right, they say well, I don't know what's in this. I don't want to put it in my body. Yeah, totally. Yeah, fine.
So in a highly hypothetical world where you are an ecstasy producer, which obviously not.
Definitely not.
Which design would you put on it?
Oh man, what a question. First of all, I of course have to say I'm not, so I don't have that.
Never suggest that.
And we've gone to extreme lengths to make sure that we are trying to stay on the right side of the law with this entire project, which has been really difficult. I'm not actually sure what the answer is. I think for me, I do a lot of design, manufacturing, sort of engineering projects. I'd be curious, what's the limit of what you can produce in terms of size and scale and complexity? And I think that would be the space I would explore. I also think these sort of micro production runs is fascinating. Pills being produced for a festival that's only open for 2 days. Yeah. I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that, and I think it's only a matter of time before we see truly personalized pills where a Simon goes and gets a pill for
his
an event.
30th birthday party.
Something like that. I think that's happening. It's happening in almost every industry. Intense personalization, rapid expansion of services provided. I would not be shocked if that would happen in this world as well.
Wow. So do you know when you said the producers have got their finger on the cultural pulse?
Yeah.
And do you think that's because for instance, they're there, and then someone from New York says, "Can you make me a New York Yankee one?" And it's a meme from another country because someone in the other country has requested that.
I think it's a push and pull.
Yeah.
I think they're always producing new designs all the time. I think they're producing them, they're sending them to have the dies and molds made. I think that's happening. And like we said, the producer we spoke to said if someone buys 10,000 pills, they'll do a custom design for them. And again, this is hearsay. This is coming from this interview. That said, I don't think that was inaccurate.
Yeah, there's no reason for them to lie, really.
No, and the cost of production has gone down so much. So I think it's both. I think they are proactively coming up with new designs that they can push, and I think at the same time, they're customers who are selecting certain things. I remember there was not even a dark web website. This was a normal web website, a Dutch ecstasy site that advertised certain pills. And then online they were saying they would always deliver different pills. You would never receive the pill that they had shown a photo of.
Oh.
And that was really fascinating to me.
Why is that?
You would receive sort of a mix of whatever they had produced recently, I believe.
Right.
But the website, they were highlighting a Donkey Kong pill or a money bag pill or things that I think they believed attracted attention.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating to me because they would allow the customer to choose specific pills irrespective of what they would ultimately deliver, knowing that in most markets they couldn't do anything
Well, they
about
can't send them back.
Right. And that was interesting to me. It was a strange world, but clearly there's certain designs that they believed would entice customers more than others.
Interesting. That's fascinating, though, isn't it?
Bizarre.
You said the production costs have decreased. Is that because of the new precursors that they've started using?
Oh, I mean the production cost for the tooling.
Oh, for the tools.
For the machinery and the tooling.
Yeah.
And that's true in every industry, really.
Yeah.
You know, whether that's from, in industries where rapid prototyping has gone kind of sort of gangbusters to just our access through globalization to manufacturers in China or Vietnam or other places for the tooling. The cost of the tooling went from taking months and months and months and hundreds of euros at a minimum to less than 100 euros in a couple of weeks. You could have a new tool.
Yeah.
I don't know how the price has changed in the marketplace. It wasn't something that we tracked. And I'd be fascinated to know how price trends in other markets. Because the Netherlands, as the main producer, the prices have sort of sat the same for the longest time, it feels here.
What is it, 10 euros?
I don't know. But it changes sort of based on supply and demand near festivals and those kinds of things. But, pills can be anywhere from just a couple of euros to 5 euros.
Yeah, cheaper here than UK.
Way less. And even in the United States.
Is that if you buy wholesale or is that...
No,
that's retail?
sometimes that's buying, retail, just a few. And... it depends on the supplier, and again, some of this is hearsay, hearing from people and talking to friends. But comparing that to people in the United States talking about spending $30 or $40 for a pill, and it's just too lucrative for the producers here to not want to exploit that opportunity.
I guess you're getting further away from the source country, right? So if you buy if you go into a coffee shop and buy some Californian cannabis, you're paying 25 euros for a gram. If you buy that same cannabis in California, you pay about $12.
Right, and the producers, from what we read and heard in other interviews, they take customer service really seriously. So the online dark web suppliers shipping things around the world, if a package goes missing or gets caught up by the police or whatever it is, they'll often reship with no additional charge. So they need to make sure their prices are factoring in the losses that they're going to have along the way. And so that's also a piece of it. And then what we seem to see, at least in the United States, I haven't explored or studied other markets, is pills are being purchased from the Netherlands, squashed and repressed in the United States with less MDMA in them, and often getting new designs. So it's people with the manufacturing equipment, but find that it's safer, more efficient, easier, cheaper to buy pressed pills and then repress them.
And dilute it down almost.
Yeah, because here, like we said, the amount of MDMA that's in pills is steadily going up.
Yes.
But that's not necessarily true in other markets.
Yes.
Where they see this as a wonderful opportunity to take a pill and turn it into 4 pills and sell it for 4 times as much in another market. So there are all these aspects of the sort of the trade side of this that I'm not completely aware of and haven't spent a lot of time diving into because it is an ocean of information you could go through. The places where I find the most excitement is online pill reports where we're able to see the first time someone posted online a Donald Trump pill. And we can sort of trace the genealogy almost of a pill in a moment in culture. And because of the access we have to that data, we're able to plot changes in these pills. And the project, as it grows, it's grown from the photos that we're taking to really trying to understand the ebbs and flows of this cultural moment in which the pills are being produced and coming out. And I hope that more of those stories are in the second book.
Yeah.
The first book was probably 80 photos and then a few stories of the marketing of the pills. And since the release of that, people have been flooding in with information, and we have greater access to these stories. And I find that part increasingly fascinating. That not only do you have a beautiful image, but you have this story of sometimes the actual producer who designed it going along with it.
And on top of that, every pill tells a million stories of the people that took them.
That's right. We originally had opened up on Instagram, and we were sharing the images, and we were trying to make it clear that we were not selling drugs, because we weren't. We were selling art prints. And that page grew to about 10,000 followers in just a couple of weeks, right before our show. And then Meta shut the page down. Fair enough. Okay. They don't want to be associated with it. But what I loved the most was people, like you say, like sharing their stories of associating with this and recognizing that they were all in different markets. And I thought that was nice. Again, these are stories that are kept in secret. They're in the dark. They're in the shadows. Now we're bringing them into the light for people to talk about them. And it also suggests something about our culture around this chemical, that people felt comfortable in a public space talking about their use of MDMA and ecstasy pills. Yeah.
It's a fascinating project. What is next? You've mentioned the next book. What sort of time frames are you talking on that?
Well, one of the problems is we're crippled in a way by the success of the project, because the number of photos that we have continues to grow. The website has the most up-to-date photos, I believe. I think there are about 160 photos right now, and the book contains 80 of them. And then we've shot more photos, and there are more opportunities to shoot photos, and we're trying to continue to document this. And so we're not sure what the exact timeline of it is. We've talked to some publishers about the book and talked about the scope of the book. But we want to get distribution of this as far as we can, and also to bring prices down. The first book was truly an art book, and I paid for it out of pocket. And so we didn't even break even.
It's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
Beautiful book.
We didn't even break even on the project because selling them for €100 a piece. We didn't even break even because we made so few of them. We just made a signed edition of 100 books. But for the new one, we're going to do an edition of 10,000 and get the prices low enough so that everyone can have it.
So you're going to make it more affordable. But the other element was the prints, weren't you? Did you tell a lot of the prints after the pop-up?
Well, at the pop-up is where I was focusing on it. I kept the site running and for people to buy prints online, and again try to bring the prices down as much as possible. We've had a trickle of people buying prints from all over the world. I've probably shipped to 30 or 40 countries.
Wow, okay.
Rolled up prints. And then Peter sells large format prints of this, and there's some galleries around the world that have his work, and private buyers in Barcelona and in Ibiza and in Miami have purchased them.
They sound like the places.
That's right. And we're also, we've explored with a number of different people who want to do also pop-up shows of this. And so our hope is sort of threefold. Eventually we'd like to do a new book that has all of the pills, including hundreds of them, which we'll soon be documenting. We'd like to do a really big show in a few galleries and spaces around the world to give people access to this. And finally, if we can get the legality sorted out, we want to do another pop-up store in Amsterdam where all of these images are on display, and we collect the stories, and we try to make that a final sort of cultural moment for the project, because the project will outlast us, and it'll outlast our ability to keep investing in it.
It's an archive, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And I hope that what it does is it gives people a snapshot into this moment. In our final collection, the 700 and something total images of the final collection when we publish it, that'll be pills from the late 90s to today. So it's 30 years of pills. Yeah. And those hundreds of pills represent a tiny drop into all that's been produced. And so it's just at the intersection or a window into this world that will continue long after us.
I wonder if there's any way of finding what was the first ecstasy pill. Because obviously in the 70s, it was Shulgin, wasn't it? He resynthesized it after it was originally synthesized by Merck.
That's right.
In the 1950s. They just used it as an intermediary, didn't they, to get from one chemical to another. Yeah. And then in the 70s, Shulgin came in and he resynthesized. But it wasn't until after, he was using it in psychotherapy, wasn't
That's
he?
Right.
But it wasn't until long after that it found its way onto the dance floor, right?
Right.
And I believe, it's urban legends again, isn't it? But I've heard that in Texas, on the gay scene in Texas, that's where it was really pioneered. And there's again, urban legend that it was originally called empathy, but then there was a pioneering drug dealer in Texas who rebranded it ecstasy, And it's just stuck since then.
It's fascinating. My degree actually in college in psychology, one of my senior projects was on the therapeutic use of MDMA, and my degree was in psychology.
Marriage counselling originally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're seeing some of that come back with projects
Yes.
at Johns Hopkins to explore therapeutic use, and I hope we see more of that exploration. I was speaking to a researcher and a musician, or a music researcher here in the Netherlands, who was talking about the rise of ecstasy use on dance floors and the fall of speed use. And there was sort of this crossfade musically, and he pointed that also the music was changing at that time. And so the music and what is the vibe of the music also seems to move in consort with the chemicals that people are taking.
Yeah, so this was the rise of house music in the 80s Chicago.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating. The question, chicken or egg, is it people are changing the chemicals they're taking and making them desire different music? Or is the music taking which leans people into a different style of chemical that they're putting in their body?
So we don't know what we know there's a correlation. We don't know what it's not causal then.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I think this project, that's probably the takeaway from this project in a lot of ways. It opens more questions than it answers.
Yeah.
But I indeed find it fascinating.
Which makes it go on and on and on.
Right.
Where can the audience or the readers find your stuff then?
I mean, the page is @tat, and that's where you'll find all of the latest imagery. That's where you'll find the sign up to be informed when there are new copies of the book. I think right now there are 70 or 80 people who have signed up. I need to update that. And that's also where you'll see all the placements that it's had around the world, and opportunities to learn more about myself and also about Peter, the photographer, who has really brought this to life in an incredible way. So @tat is where to find it.
Check it out, guys. It's a fascinating project.